Hi everybody, we are here on Sanibel Island in Southwest Florida, and I have with me today Brad MacKenzie. Brad, thank you for inviting us in today.
That's such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, folks, one thing I will tell you, and you've probably already heard, is we're in a construction zone. We got saws going on. We have music also, some little salsa music going on. So bear with us as we work through this interview. It is a construction zone, isn't it?
Everything on Sanibel is in the process of rebuilding. We'll get there.
Well, Brad, tell me a little bit about how many hives did you have before the storm here?
There are 50 hives all over the island. My thing with Sanibel honey is to produce honey here on the island with Sanibel bees only. And I put hives out at pretty much anyone's house who wants them. So if you come up and say, I want a hive, I'll maintain it for you. And I'll give you a couple jars of honey for your trouble and it's for fun. And then, maybe your garden will be a little better pollinated this year.
That's a real niche business model to have, because you have the diversity of nectar coming in, and you also get the environmental plus with all of your customers that are hosting you.
Well, and I think that's important for my customers, the folks on the island. It's a fairly environmentally conscious community here. About 2/3 of Sanibel is preserved forever. And right out back here, mangrove swamps that lead right out to Tarpon Bay, where sport fishing itself was invented over 100 years ago. And so the natural aspects of the island are really important. And so people are very excited, really. It's a good community morale booster to have bees be coming back, and
yes.
that I'm bringing them back, and people are excited to have their hives back, and other people are just excited to have the cross-pollination of, you have to have bees to have things flower, and you have to have flowers to have bees survive. So that symbiotic relationship is going to be helped out by having some new bees here.
Well, before we get to the story about the hurricane, I got one more question. What are your nectar sources here? Name a couple for us.
Well, right now, I think the ones that are going to be good for us coming into this season are going to be the mangroves, the palm trees that have some fruit on them, and sea grape, which is this tree right over here, and there might be one back in the camera over there. The sea grape has a nice white flowery plant, and the bees love that. We have noticed it's extraordinary that there's some plants flowering here, very colorful plants, really just in defiance of the salt encrusted earth that we have here.
Yes.
And so it's encouraging to see some things really popping back. The oleanders over here have white flowers on them right now, which is unusual. It's January. That shouldn't be blooming right now, but it's thrown off, but it's trying to figure its way
it is
through.
kind of amazing when we have an impact of a storm that it does change the biome.
Yeah.
It either moves it up or moves it back.
Right.
And I've always been very, very surprised on when major events happen, what happens to the flora thereafter.
Right.
There.
And I'm a little more keyed into that right now, because when I do get these new hives, I'll be feeding them myself to make sure that they're comfortable and healthy and so forth. But before I move them out to people's houses, I want to make sure that they have something to eat. So they need to be able to forage something. And that's partly self-preservation. I don't want to have to go and feed 50 hives all over the island. I'd rather feed them right here in my backyard.
Yes.
But that's the trick is, do we have enough? And I think it's encouraging to see a lot of the grass come back, a lot of the ground cover come back, because there's certainly a lot of extra salt in this soil. And to have the nature fight back so proudly and quickly is encouraging for all of us.
And bees love salt too. They really do.
Yeah, let them have it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, let's rewind the clock. We're 3.5 months since D-Day here on the island, and Hurricane Ian was knocking, and was it September the 28th? Yes. Well, step us through. First of all, did you evacuate the island, or did you stay?
I thought that all I was going to do after this storm was pick up some wind-blown hives and put them back and say, you guys going to be all right? We had never had salt water above the foundation slab of my house. We're up about 8 feet here, the elevation of the house, and we got 15 feet of sea surge. So most of the island was under at least 5 feet, and some of it under considerably more. So no, the answer to your question is my girlfriend thought I was nuts, and she still thinks, she's still angry with me, I would say, that I didn't evacuate, because I thought that, it would just be another storm, and this was the big one. And
was that a Cat 3 or a Cat 4?
It really landed as a Cat 5. The insurance companies are trying to say it wasn't, because new
data?
Well, new coverage comes into play if it's Cat 5. They have to pay more if it's Cat 5. So they're trying to keep it at Cat 4, but, they say 150 miles an hour here. I've been in 150 mile an hour winds in other places in mountain areas when they're big storms. And when they were, the time that they said it was 150, I pretty much think it was 20 or 30 miles an hour faster than that.
So it might have got up to 170.
I think so. And so, at times it was definitely Category 5. I mean, 150 mile an hour winds are Category 5.
So you were on the first story, but the first story is about 10 feet up. Am I correct?
Yeah, a lot of us live on stilts.
Yes.
And ours are about 10-foot stilts. So the ground floor was, everything in it was wiped out, but it didn't get up to the living level.
Okay, so what do you hear? What when you were in this 150 to 170 mile an hour winds?
Yeah. Well,
what does it sound like?
It's loud, and the windows shake, and we didn't have hurricane windows, and 2 of them broke in the master bedroom. So I've got video from the storm, and you can hear how loud it is in the videos.
You could hear debris hitting the house?
Well, there wasn't that much debris besides branches and so forth. Some people, in some areas, refrigerators and cars were floating by. Not so much here. One of my cars got wiped out and I replaced it, but it pushed against one of our stilts. And I thought at one point, I heard a loud crack, and I thought one of our pilings had given way. It's not clear that happened, but there are noises that scare you and intimidate you, and it's definitely, with the wind and rain pounding against your windows, it's noisy.
Now, when it got to that point, it was time to write a letter, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Well, I grabbed a paddleboard just before the water rose up, got up to about that 5 feet, and went upstairs. I couldn't get the rope that was in the garage because the door was held shut by the weight of the water. But I got that paddleboard upstairs and started to figure out what my evacuation plan was. Here I was 3 miles out in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by a wild ocean, and realizing that my house is not going to float.
And there was no help on the way. Everybody was batting down the county and the city and everything, right?
Yeah, if I went out to sea, I wasn't going to be rescued. And the storm lasted a long time. It lasted until about 6 o'clock, from about 12 o'clock till 6 o'clock here. And it was bad before and after too, but that was the main part of it. And so to answer your question, when I was in the midst of it and before I really figured out my ditch plan, there was a moment of panic, and I wrote on the wall inside, "Andrea, my girlfriend, I love you. I was wrong. I mean, I should have ditched with her." But, like I said, no one thought it would be...
Now, did she go inland, or did she stay?
She went over to Fort Lauderdale. Her sister lives there, and so...
The safe side of Florida.
For the most part, that day, yeah.
Now, the eye of the hurricane actually came through here, am I correct?
We were just on the edge of the eye, and that was why it was so brutal, is that especially as the eye passed us, the southwest part of the storm, where the winds are the most intense, went right over the island, and really, we were as heavily impacted as you can be directly, as a direct hit. And you can see that on West Gulf, which is the Gulf side of this island. Houses that burned, old houses that are completely gone. There's no foundation left. And big houses that are supposed to be securely built just down to the ground. It's awful. We're lucky in the way that you're lucky to survive a car accident, right?
Yes.
We're lucky compared to our neighbors, but we still got hit pretty hard.
Okay, so you wrote the letter on the wall.
Yeah.
And we'll get a picture of that.
Okay.
Now, you got your paddleboard.
Right.
Because this was your only escape, am I correct?
Well, that was the idea, as crazy as it sounds afterwards, was that I was going to get on my ski gear and my hard hat and put up my arms and land on the shore. And I had to get my compass out to make sure I was going towards shore.
Because you couldn't see very far during that time.
You couldn't see very far.
Yeah.
But I did know, I know this, I'm facing north here, and so that way is land.
Yes.
If the wind was blowing that way, I wasn't getting on my paddleboard.
Because you're going to Texas.
Maybe.
Or Mexico, one or the
somewhere.
other. Yeah.
I like it here.
Yeah.
But if I went that way, I figured with my arms up in a 100-mile-an-hour breeze, 3 miles to the mainland is probably 20 minutes max. And then I felt like maybe I'd be Tom Hanks in Castaway, and they'd have a film crew right down there saying, "Look, here's a guy coming from the island." I had it all romanticized. But the idea was that after that, I in my mind, I wasn't going to die that day. I was no longer going to die.
Well, to my right, which is roughly southeast, excuse me.
Yeah.
How fast did that water come up? Was it just a big wave that came in, or did it just come up very, very steadily?
It came up pretty fast. If you've seen The Shining, there's a hallway scene where the blood comes rushing down the hallway. I think it's in Her Dream, but that wave of water, and it was probably a little more than ankle high as it came around the corner and down the road here. And at that moment, I wasn't terrified, but within 20 minutes, it was 3 or 4 feet high, and within about an hour, it was as high as it was going to get. And to watch it come across this lawn and take out my beehives that were back behind here and just lift them off and float them away, that was a crazy experience. Even now, I mean, I think the trauma is wearing off, but it's still fairly recent.
So in a beehive, when the water starts coming up, it covers the entrance,
right?
And then the bees start moving on up, until they have no room to move, and then they're drowned at that point.
And the only other thing that I saw was that a lot of my lids just flipped off in the 100-mile-an-hour wind.
Yes.
The thing is, it doesn't matter how these bees get exposed to those elements, they're not going to make it. The 100-mile-an-hour winds on these, I mean, we can't stand up. So for a queen and enough of her helpers to stay in a place that's safe, they have to be in something better than a hive box on the ground, for sure. So the ones that I found on the island that are feral bees, and perhaps some of my bees if they got lucky, but probably mostly the feral bees, live in palm trees that are bent over and the hive is underneath. And they were able, and that underneath section is facing away from where the weather was coming from. And those bees were decimated, but have still kind of clawed back and kept around. So I know there's one colony because I'm trying to feed them from a hive box now and hoping to attract a queen, or if it gets strong enough, maybe they'll split. But there's a colony somewhere here, and there's some bees coming around to forage. I don't know where it is, but that's the only really live hive that I've still got that I didn't know in certain palm trees. But whole areas in the north, there's a Sativa area in the north of here towards Captiva. In that area, there are a lot of feral bees in the palm trees in sort of the lower canopy there. And they've been there time immemorial, at least the last 50 years or so. And people tolerate them and like them, and they don't bother people because they're so high up. And occasionally people get them in their house, so I go and relocate them for them, that kind of thing. But that area was just decimated. The palm trees just aren't anymore. And so, I don't know how many. There are countless numbers of wild bees that just lost their homes.
Well, Brad, I know that at this point where the storm was the worst, you're more worried about your own life at that point. What was your feelings during the time thinking about the bees and everything, either before or after? Talk me through that.
It's actually funny you say that. It was more about me, and I think it was. But once I had my own safety plan in place, I really was thinking about my home, the community, and the community here for me includes the bees, and it includes the wildlife that we enjoy, and that what makes Sanibel so special. And it was sad, and it was frightening to know that I was clearly not in the worst place. I mean, that this was pretty bad. But I could tell during the storm from where it was coming from that the people on the coast, that this is a barrier island. Barrier Island's called that because it's protecting the mainland with a sandbar. So we're living on this very fragile sandbar, and that west side is just getting pounded. And so, to drive down West Gulf to this day, where there's still not electricity, or, certainly not internet for most of these people, because they don't have most of a house for most of them. It remains very sad. And these were elegant homes owned by well-heeled people, unless they were little beach cottages that still were in there. And like I said, the beach cottages are gone. It's incredibly sad to lose that part of Sanibel, because we all, no matter how big our house is, we identify with the beach house people.
Yes.
And those little little cottages, the little real cottages, two or three bedrooms on the ground, one single story. And we have one set of friends, the couple that tied themselves to each other in their single family, stood on their bed and were still losing air.
Yeah.
So they ditched their house in the middle of the storm, wrapped themselves around a tree, and held on to it for 2.5 hours while the cars and the refrigerators and the debris were flying by. The water was pretty warm, it turns out, but what an absolute terror for these people who've been here their whole lives.
Because it's the debris that will kill you.
The debris will hit,
If the water doesn't.
Right.
Not there. Well, we have what's left of your 50 hives here.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Some of these are recovered from around the island. Most of them really, even in this shape, they're not really usable because I don't know what's in them now.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff that
oil
floated by could be toxic. And even today, this is one of my bee days. You can imagine I have a lot of work to do that isn't related to the bees right now. But one of the things I'm going to go through here and see if I'm going to keep any of these frames or foundations. And most of them, frankly, the moths are coming back, the bugs. There are so many bugs here, and if there's any trace of something edible, they're infesting these things. And so they look clean from this side, but inside they're not doing so well. And so a lot of this equipment is just going to be ditched for new equipment.
You have a great point, is you don't know what was in the water. It could be oil from a car. It could be acid from a battery that has gotten loose, and those toxins there. So I get it, and I think that's a wise thing on your side. Now, Brad, when you do a look back, what would you do differently, given that you're in a storm area? It's not ever been this bad since you've been here. Am I correct?
Right. Yeah, in 100 years.
And we have customers all around the Gulf Coast, from Houston downward all the way through Louisiana, and Alabama, Mississippi, and of course here in Florida. Yeah. And then of course all up and down the Atlantic Ocean coast.
Right.
If you had it to do all over again, what would you do differently?
Well, I think I would. It's hard to do something differently, and I have thought about that. In a perfect world, you would pick up all of your hives and put them on the second story if you knew the first story was going out.
Well, hold on right there. How much of a notice did you actually have that Ian was on his way and coming in hot?
Right. If I said 3 days, I'd be giving myself the maximum amount.
Okay.
To pick up 50 beehives all over here.
No.
And take them to Fort Myers. Take them off island.
Yes.
Find a storage place that would take live beehives into their storage place and keep them on the second floor. Now, the thing is, I would never put them on the second floor because a storage place is going to lose its roof. That's my thinking. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to put them on the second floor. I want them on the ground floor. Well, there's lots of water still in Fort Myers from the ocean from 3 months ago. And so, that really wouldn't have worked. I look at my friends and some of the commercial people, the way the storm went through the middle of Florida, you can't anticipate or prevent the kind of damage that happens to some of these enormous yards. I mean, there's just nothing you're going to be able to do to save those kinds of things. For me, I really think there's no way to have suspended these hives in a safe way. Where would they go? If I had a whole building with 2 stories in it, that would work. That's obviously not where my business is coming from when I've got 50 hives and I'm just making some local
So it's a
honey.
no-win situation for you with
really
these
was.
hives.
Yeah.
Because of being at 50 different locations here on the island and you would have to have help picking them up, putting them on a trailer.
Right.
And you're not going to get 50 hives on a trailer.
Right.
And so I get it. It was a no-win position.
There's something, you get a big truck and you put all of your hives on it and you drive it out of Florida. You drive it away and stay out of it. But you're still going to have a lot of loss if you do that. And your bees are not going to be happy. That's one of the great things about being on this island. On my Facebook page, I have photographs and videos of the places where some of these hives are. And one is on a pond that has this beautiful fountain in that has a light under it that changes, so it's blue and red and yellow. And the caption on the thing says, this is waterfront living for bees. What a life for bees in Florida. And those hives, their waterfront property was just swept away. The cinder blocks that they were on are gone over there. And, but that's, there wasn't really any picking up the hives and saving them somehow that was reasonable at the time.
So where do you go from here, Brad? You've lost all of your hives. You're fighting with insurance on your house, as most people are, my understanding here on the island. What do you do with the hives at this point? What do you want to do with your hobby?
Well, I want to rebuild because it's going to be good for community morale, and I love my bees.
Yes.
And I started a GoFundMe. People sent me money outside the GoFundMe to avoid the fee and so forth. And I've gotten a good amount of support for that, which means that my losses are going to be subsidized coming back. I'm going to have 50 hives now. I mean, I grew from 1 hive to 50 hives in 2.5 years because my girlfriend gave me a hive for my birthday in June 2.5 years ago, and it just grew organically. If I just bought 50 hives right now and I didn't know what I was doing, I'd be in trouble. But I've learned a lot. I mean, you can learn to beekeep pretty well, and I think I'm a good beekeeper. So I've gone ahead and found 50 hives with the bees that I am going to bring in here. And you can still contribute to my fundraiser.
Yes.
I still need some money there. But the point is that everybody here wants their hives back. Everyone here is engaged with that process, and we're gonna make Sanibel honey work again.
Well, good deal. Good deal.